So when I wrote the book, I kind of just broke down, okay, what is it that I do and that I teach my therapist to do? So rewire stands for, first R is root cause. How do we find the root cause of what is going on? Not just looking at somebody's symptoms, but what's driving those symptoms? And how can we ask better questions? How can we listen better and go deeper so we can be treating, because you're going to get such better outcomes if we're treating the root cause.
I'm Garrett Salpeter, and I believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from pain and injury, heal from trauma, and reach their highest levels of fitness and performance is to focus on the nervous system. In this podcast, we'll share knowledge from the frontiers of neuroscience and inspirational stories of how applying that knowledge has empowered people from all walks of life to heal, adapt, and grow.
Hello, NeuFit Nation. Welcome back to the Undercurrent podcast. I'm joined today for the second time by Lisa Chase. So Lisa, I'm excited to have you back. She last appeared on episode 55, where we talked about her work as a physical therapist on the women's tennis tour, working with professional tennis players. We talked about her teaching position as the lead instructor and co-chair of the Michigan State Osteopathic Medical School manual medicine program. We talked about her transition into private practice at Back to Normal in St. Petersburg, Florida, where she's working now. It's a fabulous practice, great place. I've been there. And that is actually one of our regional centers of excellence for NeuFit, because Lisa is one of our master instructors. And in that episode, we do a deep dive into her clinical expertise, where we talk a lot about manual therapy, muscle energy techniques, exercise, of course, how she incorporates the newbie. So I encourage you to go back and listen to episode 55 if you haven't already done so. And today, we're now in the middle of January 2026, and we're having her back on to discuss her new book, which is called Be Responsible Because the System Isn't. And is that still the
It is
the subtitle? Good. Yes. Good.
It is.
I am very grateful and feel honored to have gotten to read an advanced copy, which of course was a PDF. It wasn't the physical copy you're
Right.
I thought it was fabulous. One of the themes that I really appreciate is how it speaks to one of my fundamental foundational beliefs, that the body is inseparable from the mind. You know, we all know that the mind controls the body, right? Sends signals to tell the organs, the muscles what to do. But the body also influences the mind in a very profound way. How we move and how we hold and use our bodies influences the mind. We also talk a lot about, Lisa, you talk about how the underlying health of our system influences healing from injury and the recovery process. And I think that is so often overlooked. It's like, well, why do some people heal so much faster? Why do kids generally heal faster? But even within adults, why do some people heal and recover so much faster? It's because they don't have as much inflammatory load. Their body has enough energy and resources that they have a surplus to devote to a big effort to heal and recover from something. So there's a lot here in the book. And Lisa, I'm really excited to have you back on and dive in here. So as a jumping off point, can you tell us about your book in terms of what inspired you to write the book, and why are you releasing it now at this stage in your career?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on the podcast. I always love chatting with you, and this is always so much fun. And it was great to have you read my book and give me input. But I mean, look, I have been treating for over 30 years. And what I have seen is I sit across from patients and they are just so frustrated. They come in, for example, with shoulder pain, knee pain, and, maybe gut issues that nobody's either even identified, or they're just being shuffled off to different practitioners, right? Or they're only getting access to treatments that are covered by insurance. So I think first and foremost, just my experience of working with patients, seeing their frustration. And now healthcare is just becoming the cost of healthcare is gone, off the charts, and it sounds like, in January now, it's going to be even, higher. And, patients are frustrated. I have personally experienced this. High deductibles, things just aren't covered unless you have a major illness and you've, satisfied your deductible. Oftentimes things aren't even covered. So I think those things coupled with my experience of seeing when you treat the whole person and you address all these things that I have put in the book, amazing things happen. Like I've seen transformation in patients that have been to multiple practitioners, have had multiple rounds of physical therapy, have maybe had injections, but nobody sat and really listened to the whole story and gave them the direction of what's the right switch to turn that's going to help the whole system heal. So I really just try to take my 30 years of experience and try to put it in a format that you don't have to do everything, but it guides you of picking like what's the biggest lever that I can pull, that I can start having better health, I can heal, I can reduce my pain. So that's really, what inspired me.
That's awesome. And it definitely does. The book take a very holistic perspective, which I appreciate very much. And we will get into. When you spoke there about the cost of healthcare, you're alluding to some systemic issues, as in issues with the healthcare system
Yeah,
overall. And one of the things that you say in the book is that the system isn't broken, but it was just never built to heal. So
that's right.
unpack that a little bit more and tell us what you mean by that statement?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you look at, I think, look, the system is good for if you have acute pain, you have an emergency, you need a surgery. I think it's excellent. But that long-term healing, the ability to look at a person as a whole, I mean, the whole system is designed in subspecialties, gastroenterologist, orthopedic surgeon, podiatrist, like where people are you're basically looking in a very small focus, and you're having to go to so many multiple people, so that's how the system is built. And it's built on you know very specifically what insurance is going to cover versus not. And so unfortunately a lot of patients when they go to get care, that it just might be, well, it's not covered, or they have to jump through hoops. I mean, how many times, I'm sure you've maybe seen this in the practice that you work in with your therapist, is that a patient comes in, maybe they have back pain, they're not really responding. Okay, you want them to get an MRI, or you're thinking maybe injections, but in order for them to get to injections, then they have to do certain things. They have to have a certain amount of physical therapy, then they have to have an MRI, then there's multiple things that they have to do. So it's not about treating the patient and the person in front of you. It's about, well, what is the insurance going to cover, and what requirements do I have to do first before I can actually be getting those kinds of services that could help propel me forward.
You mentioned the I word a few times, that being insurance. And
Yeah.
it was interesting. I remember in the book, you talked about this story where you're sitting around with some of your colleagues. I believe it was at Michigan State. And
Oh, yeah.
you were saying you think you're going to start a practice. And like to a person, everyone said, don't take insurance, right?
Exactly.
So how have you gone about doing that? And part of what I'm also asking about here is, many people listening to this are fellow practice owners like yourself, Lisa. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, sort of what your perspective was on, of course, why you did that, and then also
Yep.
how you've successfully implemented and how you've successfully built your practice without any reliance on insurance whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, like I said, insurance can be good for certain things, but what I saw, particularly spending almost 10 years on the professional women's tennis tour, is I had carte blanche. Basically, I could treat the athlete and do whatever we needed to do to make sure that person got well, right? There wasn't a matter of did they have insurance or not. They were going to either pay out of pocket, or the tournament was providing, certain services. So, when I saw that, and of course, when I talked to my colleagues, they were already in it. I had been out of the traditional model for almost 10 years. So I hadn't even really dealt that much, with insurance because I was in a whole different world that doesn't wrap their head around insurance. It's all about what's best for the athlete, and we need to make sure that they can get on court and they can play. And so when they all said that, of course, I was like, really? Like, I don't know. Like, that's kind of scary. And I'm like, and you guys, I felt like they were, I had, colleagues, 20 plus years on me. And I was like, well, but if you guys aren't taking insurance, what do you think I could do that? Because if you don't take insurance, well, then, you have to have results, right? And so, I respected all of them, and literally they all said the same thing. And they said, if we could do it over again, that's what we would have done. So I, kept my overhead very low. And I just, I worked a side job while I built my practice, and I just did it one person at a time. And as the practice grew, then I could get more space and I could start to add other things and start to add employees and contractors and whatnot, but that took time, and I was willing to maybe work two jobs until I could build a practice where I could actually treat the whole person, and I could give them what they needed to get well, and my hands weren't tied around what I could and could not do. And I wanted to create an environment for other therapists to be able to work at their highest level of education, to be able to spend time with the patient one on one. And, patients really appreciate that. I mean, I have patients that come, you know, have been coming for years and years now. After they get, better, if they have another issue, they come back, they send their families, because they see, instead of going the traditional model where they may get discharged too soon, they're maybe not able to address the whole person. They would rather pay out of pocket. And as a matter of fact, especially with how healthcare is designed now more than ever, you have copays that are higher, you have deductibles, so patients are actually paying typically more because they're going 2-3 times a week to traditional care. They're not really getting what they need. And if you just come see me once a week, it'll end up costing you less because they're going to end up seeing me less times, and they're going to get better quicker.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and that's great for anyone listening to this who is offering cash services. Those are the types of conversations that you're describing that we've certainly had, helping people understand, like, hey, you could go to this PT clinic down the street, and your copay is going to be still $50 a visit or $60 a visit, and you're going to
Yep.
need twice the number of visits. So if you think about the value of your time, you think about how much you're actually going to spend, this can start to make sense from a, not just from a you're going to feel better perspective, but from a dollars and cents perspective too. So
Yeah.
I like that. And at your business too, I know you talked about people, of course, come in for elite level physical therapy and this holistic approach when they're injured. You also, though, the way I'm leading the witness when I say that, you also have some services where people can come in more for ongoing wellness or maintenance or other things, even when they're not injured, right? So can you talk a little more about that side of it as well?
100%. So we have a team of physical therapists, but we also have Pilates instructors. We have a massage therapist. We have an integrated nutrition expert. And so, and then we have lots of services that we do not only in therapy, but that patients can come in. So, for example, Master Reset with the newbie. I mean, that might be something that somebody just comes in, especially our high level athletes, to reset their nervous system. Pilates is another really great movement based exercise that for my high level athletes, they love it. I have so many athletes that once they're done with therapy, they just stick with Pilates because it just helps them move better. They're stronger. They're not getting injured. So it allows them to maintain. And, and then of course, just all the different recovery services that we have. I think, now more than may say 10 years ago, I mean, think about all the recovery centers that have popped up, right? Cryotherapy, red light therapy, salt rooms, float tanks. I mean, people are looking for, like, they understand, most people, what the vagus nerve is, right? I mean, you're there, it's becoming a little more commonplace to hear about these technologies and these different kinds of services that just people need for their well-being, to de-stress, to help them manage their own pain and improve their healing. So we have a series of, a lot of different types of services that people can use after they've finished their therapy.
I love that. And it's a great model. I know you've been very successful there, and I've gotten to come and see the facility in person and loved it. I actually got to have you do some of your, evaluation and a little bit of
Yeah.
manual work on me. It was really wonderful experience overall. And I laid on
Yeah.
the master reset and vibroacoustic mat and all.
Yeah.
I'm reminding myself I need to come back, book my next trip back to St. Pete.
I know, it's so good.
So yes, it's a really wonderful practice. So for you, the listener, if you're interested in learning more about how to add these types of services into your practice, Lisa's clinic is a wonderful model there. So really, really good. Let's
Awesome.
let's transition into a little bit of the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of the book itself. So
Sure.
one of the things that I really like about it, in addition to the themes that I mentioned in the intro, the themes of taking this more holistic approach to, to pain and injury, and really understanding and unpacking how underlying health influences injury, recovery, and healing and all that, which I just say again to emphasize how powerful and how effectively you cover those topics here. You also have really simple and, I think, complete and powerful and effective frameworks. Like, for instance, you have the rewire method and you have the pyramid of possibility. These that I think are just really, really catchy and really effective in terms of, they give you the steps that you need to do to really apply your model here. So can we dive in, and can you tell us about the rewire
Yeah.
method?
Yeah. So look, this is what I do with patients. So when I wrote the book, I kind of just broke down, okay, what is it that I do and then I teach my therapist to do? So rewire stands for, first R is root cause. So that's something from the moment I opened up my practice, was like, okay, how do we find the root cause of what is going on? So not just looking at somebody's symptoms, but what's driving those symptoms, right? And how can we ask better questions? How can we listen better and go deeper, so we can be treating? Because you're going to get such better outcomes if we're treating the root cause. So that's the R. Then E is embody awareness. So from really day one, I like to teach patients, like, what are the signals telling you that your body is giving you, whether it's digestive issues, it's pain, it's headaches, it's fatigue. What are these things telling you, and what can you learn from these signals? And then what are the triggers? So then I like to try to teach them about, okay, once you listen, well, let's figure out what's triggering. So for example, you wake up in the middle of the night with a headache. Well, that's probably your pillow or your sleeping position, right? So just starting to give them more awareness about, okay, the reason that they came in, what's going on in their body, and how to listen. W's for whole system integration. Okay, so that is the foundation of what we do here, and it's looking at the whole system. So it's nervous system health, it's looking at our sleep, could be hormones, again, could be gut health, movement, how we're moving, how our environment is interacting with us, and is it helping us or is it hindering our healing? Then I is informed action. So now, once we're more informed, now it's like, okay, well, what are the right steps for me for my particular situation? So, again, if somebody's coming in with back pain and their predominant issue is gut health, and and issues that maybe with constipation or things like that. Well, if I'm not addressing their nervous system health and their gut health, then it might be hard to get them out of back pain. So again, taking the right action for, depending on what, I feel is the main, again, going back to the root cause. Then R is resilience training. So this is really, so what I find in so many instances is either one, patients find that when they're out of pain, they think they're done with therapy. Or if they're in traditional model, they basically get discharged once they're kind of out of pain and moving better. But for me, and we'll talk about this when we get to the pyramid, I want to take them to the top of the pyramid. I want to do what's called resilience training. So I want to build their capacity. I don't want to just treat the symptoms. I want to build the capacity. And this is where I love the newbie, because I can build their capacity, not only getting them out of pain, but now how can I, build their strength? If they want to do a sport, or maybe they want to travel and they want to just be able to walk 20,000 steps. How do you build somebody's resilience and their capacity past the healing stage? I think there's one example. I just recently had a client that I saw who came to me for neck pain, but he had also just had back surgery. And he was doing traditional care before he decided to come to me for his neck. And they discharged him before he returned to any activities. Like, he didn't get back to any exercise, and really didn't even feel comfortable rotating his body. And last night we just used the newbie, and he was doing all sorts of rotational movements, and he was like he didn't have that fear response, because we were using the newbie. So that was it was a great example of just starting to build his capacity and his confidence in moving. And then lastly, it's empowered, evolution, which essentially is, you're the driver of your healing journey. And I think too often we give over our power to somebody who's in the medical field, right? We're like, well, whatever they're saying must be gospel. This is as good as it's going to get. This is what happens because I'm aging. Okay, yes, some of those things may be true, but there are other things and other, treatments and things that you could maybe do. And so I really try to empower patients with tools, and with, and just with information and things that they could be doing to help themselves.
Thank you so much for listening to the Undercurrent podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how NeuFit and the newbie can impact your life, please visit our website at www.new.fit, that's neu.fit, so you can learn more about how it might integrate into your professional practice, how you can use it as a patient, and you can also connect with our team there.
I love that framework. Thank you for talking us through that. I have several areas to dive in deeper and directions to go with that. I do want to start, though, by asking a question in the W part for whole system integration. You mentioned hormones, gut health, how these, of course, influence health and healing and recovery and pain and energy and all that. So in that, are these things that you're providing education on, that you're actually working with people on? Are you referring out? I know you mentioned it back to normal. You have someone who, you said does, as a nutrition expert who can do some of that work with people. So how do you, if you get to the point where you're looking holistically and you think it is, it's not mechanical pain here, it's not, tissue damage, but it's more hormonal, it's more gut health. Since you mentioned those examples, what's your approach in those cases?
Yep, I think that's a great question. So with every new evaluation that comes in, they get not only a full body physical exam, so we're looking at the whole system. We are doing a comprehensive heart rate variability, so looking at the health of the nervous system, which may flag hormone, sleep, energy. Are there certain organs that are getting overloaded in the system because of the nervous system load? We'll also do a body composition. So we like to look at, where are people at or with their, body fat? Are they having a lot of or too much of visceral fat? Are they losing muscle? So we like to look at that to see, especially if somebody's got coming in with low back or lower body issues. I like to see like what's happening to their leg muscles because that can affect their balance. So we look at that, and then they get a consultation with Jillian, who is a functional nutritional therapist who's done extensive training in hormones, in gut health. And so they'll, do a session. Usually during the evaluation, myself and our therapist will identify, okay, is there a bigger issue here that is really going to limit, or is there some complementary types of things like, okay, an athlete needs to get, learn what better food choices for, building muscle or for recovery, as an example. Or like I had a client, this was not too long ago, who came in with multiple joint pain. Everything hurt. She couldn't exercise, she couldn't walk, everything was hurting. Well, when I see multiple joint complaints, I think systemic. And so from day one, I was like, we've got to get you hooked up with Jillian because something in your body is creating inflammation. We were working together and, she was making some progress, but it was like, I felt like it was a whack-a-mole. This got better, then this popped up. This got better, then that popped up. And finally, she was able to get with Jillian. And after just 2 weeks of cutting out sugar, her pain was dramatically better. And now she's walking, she's exercising. So, so for me, I feel like if you're a physical therapist and you don't have somebody like that, find somebody in your community that you can work with that can take the lead on these things, and learn a little bit about like when is it just that game changer and when is it like nice to have, like, for me it's like if it's really going to be, again, what's the biggest lever that I can pull that's going to help this person's healing. And in this case, it was we needed to clean up the nutrition and the diet and things like that and get that inflammation under control.
I love that you're taking that approach. I'm so glad you are. I know it's important and effective. And with all of that said, do you ever have people who are like, gosh, back to normal team? Like, I just came to you to fix my knee. What are you asking me about my hormones and my sleep? Like did you ever have those?
Oh yeah, of course, but it's our job to educate, and hopefully again, through the book, we have, different ways of, educating patients. But look, you got to meet people where they're at. And so for some people, you can bring this up and maybe they're not interested in going down that path, and that's okay. We do our treatments and we see how far we can get. And, for some, maybe it's enough. And then for others, they may kind of loop back around and go, well, maybe I should take a closer look at some of these things. So, I think that should be our approach when we work with clients is, again, you just got to meet people where they're at and figure out, what people are willing to do. And, and we're a guide, and that's all we could do.
I love that. It's like the trek up a mountain in terms of being the guide, part of the metaphor, and then also this, finding the root cause and then going through the steps and then building resilience and then the empowered evolution. And when you were talking about some of those later stages about resilience training and the evolution, the R and the E at the end of Rewire, it reminds me a lot of sort of how I describe the NeuFit method in the treatment process. When we scan around on somebody's body during mapping, we find those hotspots. It's areas where the nervous system is actively governing or limiting function in a certain area. And phase one, so to speak, of treatment is addressing those areas to bring up the weak links, to get wherever there's deficiencies, bringing those up to baseline, whatever that means for that individual. And then from there, once everything is at baseline, then it's increasing the functional capacity of that individual. And that, as you said, is resilience training, but building capacity over time. So it's a very staged, logical progression. And I love the framework. And I wish I
Yeah.
had thought of it. Of course, Rewire, brings up neuroplasticity. It's very
I
obvious.
know that does.
Oh, this is so good. So
I love it. Well, now you have a resource.
that's right. That's right. Every time I say Rewire, I'm gonna, send you a penny. It's
That
like
would be awesome.
a lot of things here. Gosh, Garrett was saying
I
Rewire.
know.
He was using that word a lot. So one of the other models that you use is your pyramid. So
Yes.
on this podcast and in my book, I talk about the pyramid of performance. We talk about how, and this is different from that. That just,
Yes.
in case we piqued anyone's interest, that is how you need to start with a foundation of proficient movement. You need to have the requisite mobility in all of your joints and motor control, and then you need to have energy systems, then strength and speed, and then the skill of one's sport comes on there. And the problem happens when people start focusing on, as we were just talking about Gray Cook before this.
Yeah.
Before this, Lisa, he had a great quote about not wanting to build fitness on top of dysfunction, and so
That's right.
a lot of athletes, go right into training their sport, and they don't have the physical prerequisites or the foundation there, so they're building on top of a shaky foundation, and it's gonna topple over, and that manifests as either just hitting a ceiling in terms of skill development prematurely, or more often it's having injuries and not being able to sustain that pursuit or that career for years and for a longer period of time. So we're talking about a different pyramid here, but I mentioned that because it's very in line with your philosophy, and that comes through in the book as well. So let's tell us about your pyramid. So
Okay.
you show me yours,
All right.
show me mine. We're talking pyramids here.
Yes. So we have actually a pyramid in all of our treatment rooms, and with our evaluations, it is something that we utilize to actually help the patient. Like, we explain the pyramid to them, and then we want them to kind of identify, like, well, where are they and where do they want to go? Okay. So these are the stages that people come into therapy, and that we move them along. So the first and foremost is the bottom of the pyramid, which is where we call it that rest and restore. So this is the place, again, if I'm doing my heart rate variability and I identify nervous system health is an issue, they've got low heart rate variability, they're not sleeping well, they're obviously going to be in a lot of pain. The last thing I'm going to do is start doing dry needling and cranking up the newbie, right? What I'd rather do is do master reset, coach them on sleeping. Like, I always tell patients, if there's one thing I can improve, it would be your sleep. Because if we're sleeping better, then everything is going to be better. So I want to look at those things. Then I want to use my technologies and my manual therapy. So manual therapy to start restoring mobility again, which is going to change that neural input to the system, and then use the technologies, whether it be, using master reset at first and then starting to do the mapping. And so I'm restoring their motion. I'm starting to get them out of pain, and I'm hopefully they're sleeping better, and then addressing things in their environment. If they have poor sleeping habits or environment or ergonomics at work, if they're doing things that are just perpetuating the problem, then I'm just gonna, I'm not going to get very far. So I like to look at those things in the beginning. So that's kind of that rest and restore. So then once I've kind of done that, now I want to repattern and rebuild. So now I want to really retrain movement patterns, build my capacity. This is where I might do some more functional testing, for sure, using the newbie, not only with my mapping, but now starting, to use it for my mobility work, for my, strength and retraining work. And this is the phase that too often in traditional models, therapists will discharge patients. So they never get to the next stage, which is where we build capacity. That's recondition and elevate. So now once I have my foundational movement, which is what Gray always talks about, it's okay, get the movement right. Now you can build strength, endurance, build your capacity. So now, depending on what that person wants to do, are they a high level athlete, or do they, they just want to play pickleball, or maybe they want to play with their kids, or they want to go on vacation and walk, 20,000 steps. Now you have to build the capacity for them to be able to do that. And so now, that's where we're really pulling in our Pilates and, and more, fitness based types of things to really, build that foundation. And then last is what we call rise, which is now we're at the top of the pyramid. And look, with any professional athlete, they know they have to do something to maintain where they're at, right? There is constant maintenance that is going on, recovery that is happening. So now we need to teach our patients and give them and empower them on, okay, now what can you do to keep yourself at the top of the pyramid? Because we know if you don't do maintenance work, you're going to slide down the bottom, back down to the bottom. And we see that with, patients that stop their exercise, or, they're not doing recovery, or, some of the things that they need to do to maintain. Well, then they just keep re-injuring themselves. So I really want to empower them when they get to the top of the pyramid, that they know what to do. And some of that maintenance might be they're coming in for massage, or maybe they come in to see us once a quarter. And so we figure out what is best for them, so then they can be more in control of not getting re-injured, and minimizing those risks.
I really like that model, and I believe I heard you say that you actually show it to patients and have them sort of self-select where they are on that, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah.
That's great. So there's also, I noticed just one sort of practical question in terms of how you implement this in your practice and how you think about it. There's some overlap. Like when we talked about your rewire method, we talked about that order, there's, you talked about increasing capacity, and you talked about, there's some kind of overlap with repattern, recondition, rise. Is it one of them is like your internal framework and one is customer facing, or do you share both of them, or how do you sort of interrelate, and how do you actually use them and share them, especially patient facing messaging?
Yes, I would definitely say patient facing, it's more the pyramid, right? It's like, just try to keep it super simple for patients of, here's where we're at. And then the rewire, I think it's more, it's things along the way that I'm teaching them, but I'm not necessarily frameworking it out, like I have in the book. And I think when I did the book, it's like I tried to explain kind of what in my head I'm doing, throughout somebody's journey. But this is really more what we review with patients, and take them through those steps.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That makes sense. I just wanted to sort of see how those pieces.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Get together there. So, I like the framework so much. I want to bring up one more from the book. So we have a pyramid, and then we also have pillars.
Yes.
So
pillars.
I really like the pillars because this is where you've already talked about root cause analysis and looking holistically. And this, in the section of the book that talks about the pillars, this is where we really see the effect of underlying health and lifestyle on healing and performance, and how those interrelate so much.
Yes.
These are the pillars of lifestyle and health. So
can
you tell us about the pillars, and then we can dive in, do a deeper dive on anywhere between 1 and 5 of them, sort of whatever you'd like to most.
Yes.
Most.
Well, for the first 2 I think are like very powerful, and for me they're non-negotiable. So the first is regulating our nervous system. So it's just stress in general, which I learned from you about the threat bucket. So stress can be something good for us, like exercise, and then something maybe not so good for us, not eating well, not exercising, smoking, different things like that. So my job again in using my heart rate variability is that's going to give me a snapshot into their nervous system. So it's not something you can fake out. Okay. So I love that I can get that snapshot, and then it opens up a conversation with somebody to find out, okay, are there inherent things that are going on that are just stacking all those threats that's then triggering their pain? And is that something that I need to, address, sooner rather than later? So first and foremost is just nervous system, load, and figuring out if that is a big lever that I need to pull. The next is sleep. And when I wrote the book, I really tried to look at the research because I see it in my practice, but I wanted to go, well, does the research say what I'm seeing? And so some facts, that I found were when somebody has less than 6 hours of sleep, it causes pain centers to become activated by 126%. So if somebody is not sleeping well, it's going to activate the pain center. So they're going to have more pain. It also puts you at risk for injury by 70%. So that's, especially important in our athletes when we're returning to sport, but, if they're not getting the sleep, they're going to be more at risk for getting injured. And then strength and endurance can drop like 10+%. So, so pushing people, to exercise, or sometimes again, if they're not sleeping well, I might want to pull back on exercise, so you have to kind of figure out, well, what are the drivers of poor sleep? And there are so many things that can disrupt sleep. But it's a very big factor. And if people aren't sleeping, they're not able to get into that deep restorative sleep, and therefore it's much harder, for them to heal and to get out of pain. And then the third is biology. So this is kind of gut health, inflammation, energy stores. Like what are maybe things internally? And I use the example of the one patient where, sugar was creating a lot of inflammation in her body and causing her to have all these pains. And no matter what I did, it would get better, but then something else would pop up. So if I don't address that, I'm not going to be able to, to get her well. And then the fourth is movement. And so obviously this is the main thing that we do as physical therapists is we look at movement, how joints are moving, how muscles are firing, under firing, over firing, how the body is working together. So, looking at posture and, all the things that we need to do to have healthy movement. But if the top three are, are big drivers, it's going to be very hard to get, somebody to move well. And then the last is really our environment. And I look at this in multiple ways. First, are things in your environment, which could be, I've seen patients that came in with multiple issues that ended up having mold toxicity. So is it something that's more significant like that? Is it the computer? Computer is like my number one. If somebody's coming in with neck and back pain, and they're on a computer for, 7-8 hours, I've got to make sure that setting is as good as we can get it, because that's going to be a big driver. So it could be things like that in the environment that are contributing. And then the other piece is, and I've helped several patients do this, is to create an environment at home that signals health, wellness, recovery, calmness. And so a recovery room where we do, the maybe a biomat, so I've had some people buy, the newbie. So, we set up the room where, they go into the room and they have a diffuser, they might have red light, and it's just a place where they can reset, their nervous system, and have something in their home. So those are the 5 pillars.
On the most recent one there, in terms of setting up your environment, I think that's so powerful. I mean, if you look at it fundamentally, our habits really determine who we become in the subsequent months and years. And
Yes.
if I like, I try to organize my space, so I have a little hurdle out here where I do my Bulgarian split squats. So I can work on like a version of a couch stretch, but with just a little more muscular effort to support the weight, and have my bars set up for hanging from pull up hangs, and working that in, having it there allows me to see it regularly, where I do it regularly. Whereas if I had to like go and get it and set it up, I just wouldn't do it as much. It takes that activation energy. But if you have it
Yes.
ready to go, so being intentional about how you set up your environment is great. I mean, some people, I would like to do more of this, in the future as well too. But some people I know have their living room set up where they don't have couches. They do a lot of floor sitting, or instead of a coffee table, they'll have wedges for little kids to roll around and stuff like that. And it really influences what you would do. It just sort of guides behavior, and it informs and influences behavior in a really powerful way. So I'm glad you did that.
Yep.
Also want to ask you, Lisa, since you mentioned stress and sleep as two of the first most influential pillars here in the book. I believe you. I know I saw Aura Ring. I think you were talking about your personal experience where you had one. So, on an ongoing basis, do you use any wearables to track that? You mentioned the HRV, the tester that you use there in the clinic where you sit down for 5 minutes. But what do you do on an ongoing basis now, personally?
Yes. So, yes, I know you use the Whoop. I use the Aura Ring. So I've got my Aura Ring on, and I use it every day. I'm looking at how was my sleep, how was my heart rate variability? Am I getting enough movement? And then I want to figure out, okay, well, what were the triggers? So, right now it's like, okay, what's happening with my sleep? Okay, did I eat too late? Did I have, a glass of wine before, at dinner? What are the things that are triggering it? And then knowing, okay, for the next day, I need to do some things like, can I really push my body, or should I be doing, more things to help me recover? So I use it personally, and then, I do introduce it to patients as a way that if they want to have that information, especially for my athletes. In the book, I do reference a journal. So I created 2 journals that'll be in the resources. So one is a high performance journal, more for athletes, and one's a whole body journal. So it allows you to kind of track these things that you might track in Aura. So for some people that don't want to use technology, I'm going to give them a way that they can use this to kind of track daily, and then figure out, okay, what does that mean at the end of the week and at the end of the month? And then what changes can I make, based on the information that I'm getting?
And I like how in the book there's an action item, a first thing to try for each section here. And when we talk about these 5 pillars, each of them is its own very in-depth and thorough chapter, where in the stress chapter, for instance, Lisa talks about her favorite recovery tools. She mentioned the Master Reset, and there's others in there. I think you talked about heart math and some myofascial. I know you're a melt enthusiast for this, and other things in there. And then in sleep, you talk about the habits and rituals and routines that are very supportive in some of these metrics and the research, and then likewise in the other sections as well. So they're all very good, and each of them could be a podcast episode on their own. However, for today, we're going to encourage people to read the book to learn more.
Yes,
because remember, readers are leaders, and
that's it.
I heard a great quote that somewhere along the way that said, the biggest difference between the person I am now and the person I'll be 5 years from now is the books that I read I've just heard that, or also the other version is the books that I read and the number of uncomfortable conversations that I have.
Yes, and the associations that you have.
Yeah.
You become the 5 people you spend the most time with. So surround yourself with, people that are going to help push you outside of your comfort zone and, help you strive to be the best you can be.
Amen. People like you who are good role models for me. So I appreciate that very much. As we wind down our discussion here, Lisa, is there anything more? Of course, we could go in deeper on some of these topics, but is there anything more at a more general, higher level that you'd like people to know from the book, or anything else that adjacent to or relevant to the topics we've talked about here today?
I mean, look, what I would say is you don't have to give your power away. There are a lot of options, and hopefully, in this book, it is going to lay out a framework for you that one you can help self guide, but also there is, in one of my chapters I give an overview of how to partner with the right practitioner. Okay, so you don't have to settle. You don't have to settle with somebody, a physician or a therapist or whatever it is that is not going to collaborate with you, who's not willing to talk to other therapists or other practitioners, who's not maybe willing to look outside of the traditional model. So there are great, practitioners out there. So I encourage, people to like take a look at the book. Again, you can pick what's the main area that you have to focus on. You work on that. And then it's finding and partnering with the right practitioners who have the right mindset and, who are going to dig deeper. And not settle for this is good enough.
And when you say you don't have to give your power away, and the overall message of the book, one of the things that struck me about the book is that it's really for practitioners and patients both. It can be read through either lens, and
Yes.
one can derive a lot of value in either of those positions there.
Yes. Agreed.
So before I ask you my final question, in terms of the book, what's the best place for people to find and buy the book? Is it Amazon or other channels?
It's going to be Amazon. We will probably have a link also on our website, but yes, Amazon is going to be where we are going to publish the book. So I would say Amazon, or you can check our website for a link where you can buy the book.
And can you please remind everyone, in case they have forgotten or haven't seen you yet digitally, your website, URL, and your Instagram handle?
Yep. So backtonormalpt.com.
And it's 2. It's the number 2. It's
not
not but the numeral 2.
It's the number 2. Yep. Yep. And same for our Instagram and Facebook.
That's right. Yes. They're a good follow. Definitely worth the follow on social media. So
awesome. Thank you.
Final question is a new one, Lisa, since you were last on.
Okay.
If you could shout any message from a mountaintop for everyone to hear, or put any message on a billboard for everyone to see, what would your message be?
Well, that's a no-brainer. Be responsible.
There we go. And what is that? We're coming full circle here. So what does that mean if I, in a sentence to a paragraph, what does it mean to actually be responsible?
Well, look, we have to be responsible for ourselves. So again, we talk about not giving our power away. So I have to be responsible for my own habits and what I'm doing and how I'm participating in my health and my well-being, right? I can't expect a practitioner, to help, do everything, right? So I have to do my part, whether that's finding the right practitioner or it's, doing the habits, tracking things and, paying closer attention to our body signals. I think, again, we have to take ownership, it's our body. And so if we want to be well and healthy and live a long, life, then we have to do our best to be responsible.
So does MD not stand for medical deity?
I guess.
Sorry, you made a beautiful, powerful concluding statement there, and I hope my bad joke didn't distract anyone from the message there. But yes, be responsible. It reminds me of the concept of extreme ownership.
Yeah.
Good overlap.
Yeah.
And
that's good. I like that.
That's wonderful. And if you are as inspired as I am to be responsible with your own health or supporting your patients, this book is a wonderful manual. I highly recommend it. And thank you, Lisa, for the work that you've done, for the work you poured into this book. I know truly is a labor of love to write something like this. And thank you for being one of our master instructors, Centers of Excellence for NeuFit. You put the excellence in the Center of Excellence program. You're wonderful. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you over the last many years. And I really, really appreciate you. Thank you, Lisa.
I appreciate you too. Thanks for all your support.
All right. And thank you for tuning into this episode of the Undercurrent Podcast. We'll see you next time.